Welcome everyone to today's social system mapping SenseMaking session for November 4th, 2024. I recognize there's some weird green lines, I think they are, but I'm not going to worry about it on my screen. So, Amy, how far am I going?
Go as far as you want to. I thought you could go through introductions, but I'm happy to at any time.
Okay, so so what this is for, especially for Bobby, since you're new to this particular meeting, although you may have seen recordings, I think, but so this is a vision about a possibility. The possibility being that social system mapping can help, can support communities moving from systems of dominance, exploitation, and extraction to systems of connection, reverence, and regeneration. It's also a learning opportunity for us to learn about some sense-making things about social system mapping, an opportunity to contribute your own insight and experience, and it's a community of practice. So for today, we're hoping that you come away with a sense of the potential that we're inspired by, even if it all will take a while to sink in and land for all of us. It's still landing for me. But that there's a sense of potential that you begin to feel, and that you meet some cool folks and feel welcomed by them, and that you go away at least a little bit curious about social system mapping and how it can help communities learn how to be stronger quicker. And that in the focus of the sessions, of these first Monday sessions, is that you see how we can explore, is that I think this texts are changing. Yeah, or I'm just not reading them frequently enough. Anyway, that you get exposed to a useful framework. Amy, I'm gonna ask you to, I'm noticing that I am just way too sped up and stuttering, and would think it would be for me to stop doing that. And because I'm just exacerbating the problem with myself. So I'm gonna ask you to proceed from here, if that's okay.
I'll be glad to. Let me back up a little bit on my slides and present. So I'll do the slides now.
Thank you.
All right. So for the rest of our agenda today, I'm going to lead us through the first 20 or so minutes and cover some of the basics of social system mapping. And for the second, probably the last 2/3 of our agenda, Curtis is going to lead us in learning about a tool. Uh-oh, I didn't mean to do that.
Did I do that?
I'm going to stop sharing. I thought I was sharing.
Did I do something?
You move to okay, so just
this is about me. Was it me?
So we are learning, we are practicing, just for everyone's understanding, we are practicing sharing leadership and sharing holding of our work together, and we're starting and so this is the three of us, sort of all three of us co-holding parts of this session, and each of us sharing different slides. And so one of the things we're learning here is, what does Mentimeter do if one person is, if we're all in there and we're all poking around doing different things? So I didn't touch anything, but
I think it was me.
I'm going to just close out of Mentimeter now, because I don't think we need me to be in there anymore. Okay. And I can reopen it when the time comes if needed. But Amy is doing a great job, and I'm going to stop talking.
And thank you all for indulging us as we laugh at our own, figuring all this out. But I think where I left off is Curtis was jumping right into his section, but he will, after we have a little bit of time on looking at the basics and getting into breakout rooms for a few minutes, he is going to lead us through a model for SenseMaking called Designing Exchanges. And then I believe we'll have some time, Curtis will tell us, for some additional breakout time, and then just some review and reflection. And we are scheduled to go into until 11:30 today. So I hope that you can stay the full time, but if you need to leave early, that's certainly something that you can do. In fact, one of the things, again, this is one of our practices that we want to do, is we want to invite you to participate in the way that you want to participate. And Kara is going to put us in breakout rooms a couple of times. And if for some reason you don't want to be in a breakout room, it would help Kara to know that. So if you could rename yourself by putting that equal sign in front of your name, Kara will know that you would prefer not to participate.
Like
And then
I
if you
just
need,
did.
yep.
Yeah.
Pardon
Look
me?
at mine for a model.
What did you say?
Look at mine for a model, my name, if that's what you.
Okay, so Christine has changed hers, right. And then if you need to leave early, it could also help us and Kara to know if you'll put an L in front of your name to leave early. Curtis, are we going to need facilitators and navigators today?
I don't think so.
Okay, so no breakout room, equal, leave early, L. So we'd like to have everybody introduce themselves. And so we use this tool, as Christine said, called Mentimeter. And Mentimeter allows you to also interact with the questions that we've prepared for you. And so in the chat, Kara is going to put a link that you can click on and use it to participate. And what I'm going to ask you to do is click on that link, type in your name, your pronouns, where are you, your location, and a network or networks that you're supporting. And then you hit the enter or submit button, I can't remember which, and we'll actually see all of your answers on my screen. And just speak up if you have a question about this.
I think I'm doing something wrong because it's not typing for me.
Christine, do you have a thought? Because I'm actually watching this screen for Willard.
I'm thinking, I don't know how to do that. Well, maybe Willard, are you okay if we don't have your name on there today, or you could put it in the chat?
Yeah, that's fine. I was feeling a little bit like you, Christine. I don't know how to do that, but I'll put it in the chat.
That's great. Okay.
Let's see, we got Jim and Bobby, welcome, and Mary, and then Willard will be in the chat. And I think that's everybody, unless somebody else has joined.
And can I make a support suggestion for Willard?
Yes.
Which is, this is an option. You don't have to do it, Willard, but when we go into breakouts, Kara could put me and Willard in a room, and then I could help Willard figure out what's going on with his, if you'd like that support, Willard.
No, I wouldn't.
Okay, fine. Let's move ahead.
Okay, guys, so I have another question for you. So as you think about the network or system that brings you here today, what is the possibility that you envision in the system in which you're engaged? What's the possibility that inspires you to be here? Type that and share that with us. And I see Willard's also, if y'all want to check the chat, I believe putting his in the chat as well. Okay, I think we almost had everybody. If you're still typing, do that and hit submit, but you guys can take a look at that. Great. And then there's our last one. Wonderful. I appreciate you guys doing that. And then I think this is your final question for at this time, and that is, how familiar are you with social system mapping? So if you'll choose your response. So roughly half of us have been really engaged in creating and teaching about social system maps, and about half of us have a rough idea and can find our way around. So it's always kind of just good to know, just to orient ourselves. So for some of you, or at least half of you, this is going to be very familiar content. And then maybe for some, it'll be new or just kind of a refresher. So I want to go through a little bit about what is social system mapping. And one way we think about it is that it is a synthesis of several other different types of maps. And so you can see in the bottom of my screen some different types of maps that you might be familiar with. And in a social system map, we are bringing dimensions of these other maps into a social system map, and the social system map is tracking these parts or dimensions and tracking them over time. So we see it evolve and change over time. And because it is multi-dimensional, it really requires a process in order to help us mine the richness that is contained within a social system map. So we talk about this as being a process more than a product. A social system map is online, interactive, and accessible. Just late last week, I had the opportunity to share with a new group a new social system map, and I had two of the users jump on Zoom with me, and it was so fun to see how engaged they were with the fact that they had access to this tool online via a link, and watching them interact and how they moved around was super fun to see. Just how, so it's a tool that's for everybody and can be very engaging. And in fact, with these two people who were early users, they were already having ideas about, oh, it would be great if we had blah, 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 blah information, or if we had XYZ. And so they were already thinking about ways to iterate this map, how we could continue to make it more useful to them and their community. And so they were noticing with me that this is a dynamic tool, it's ongoing, and something that together we engage and keep useful for the community, and do a lot of meaning making and sense making, which is what we are here today to learn more about sense making with the social system map. So the purpose overall, which Christine has already mentioned, but it bears repeating because these words are so powerful, is to support a global movement to shift systems of dominance, exploitation, and extraction to systems of connection, reverence, and regeneration. And so most of us, I'm guessing on the screen, are somehow engaged in system shifting work. That's what brings you here. And so social system mapping is a tool that is to help support your work, my work, all of our work in our various spheres of system shifting to help make that happen. And so what do we need to make that happen? And we talk about two things. We need strong networks. So that, again, is something you've probably already noticed, believe, or practicing, that it's going to take networks to address some of the changes that we are seeking, and strong networks of wise change agents. So I think of myself as I participate in this community of practice, and maybe you think of yourself too as you show up today, as continuing to want to grow in my ability, our ability to be wise change agents. And so today, that's what we're about as we lean into a tool for sense making. So as wise change agents, we also pay attention to these two fundamental shifts. So social system mapping helps us work on this first shift I want to talk about, which is a relational shift. And so by relational shift, what we're referring to is making this shift from just being an individual and thinking that I, Amy, can control everything around me, about my world, about who I become, about what I can offer the community, to realizing that we are not just solo actors, but we very much are connected. We are interdependent, connected selves. And so you may be familiar, I know that I often quote Dr. Martin Luther King. He talks about our interrelatedness. We have this term Ubuntu that reminds us that we are connected. And so this social system map can help us really lean into that relational shift and recognizing our interconnectedness. The second shift is a cognitive shift. And by a cognitive shift, what I mean is making the shift of seeing the world in a mechanistic way to being able to see it in a more complex way. So it helps us embrace a complex systems worldview. And instead of having just this either or thinking, helps us embrace a both and thinking. It also helps us when we're thinking about complex systems, realizing that we don't push on lever A and predict that outcome B will happen. But in fact, the types of things that we are trying to address are complex, and the solutions will be emergent. And so social system mapping helps us see that emergence and even begin to start to expect that emergence. And this graphic here, I want to just point out the colors if you haven't noticed. So the orange is reminding us of the relational shift, and the purple is reminding us of the cognitive shift. But at any time, I might be paying attention to one or the other. But the idea is that both are needed, and they can actually interact with each other. One may impact the other. As I push on one, something else may happen in the other shift. And so that's what this visual helps us see, is that we are actually talking the relational shift and the cognitive shift as two perspectives on the same thing. And so the invitation to me and to you and to all of us is that we look at those shifts regularly and together as a community, and that social system mapping helps us make both of these shifts, the relational and the cognitive. So with that little bit of some of the basic building blocks, I want to now give you some time to talk, and we're going to get into breakout rooms for about 5 minutes. Kara is going to set that up for us. And in the breakout room, I just want to invite you to reintroduce yourself and maybe your network. And if you want to talk about a possibility or a challenge that you have currently facing you with your network. So we'll do this for about 5 minutes. I'm going to stop sharing and see if Kara is good to send us to breakout rooms.
I always have adapting our plan questions based on attendance. So I would either have 2 small groups of just 2 people apiece. Otherwise, Jim is leaving early, and so we could have a group of 4 that may reduce to a group of 3, depending on when Jim is heading out. I don't know if there's a preference one way or another.
Group of 4.
Excellent. Okay. Do we need a little bonus time since we have a additional person?
We're,
I would suggest that we stick to the 5 just so we'll have time to
Got
get through everything. But I think our friends here will probably prioritize Bobby since she's new and get to know Bobby. And then you guys make sure you introduce yourselves to Bobby. See you in 5. Welcome back, everybody. I trust that you had some great conversation. I hope you did, getting to know each other a little bit better. So I want to share with you the theory of transformation behind social system mapping. And so I'm going to go through, I don't remember, about 10 slides that sort of build this theory and kind of walk you through what each slide is seeking to communicate to us about the theory of transformation behind social system mapping. So in this slide, this represents maybe the people on the ground in a city, it could be across the globe, who are working on some particular issue or systems change effort that's the same thing. But these people may not know each other. They might know each other. Some may be working in cohorts, but they don't necessarily maybe recognize each other as somehow contributing together to the same systems change effort. But then a few of them do start to realize, hey, we are working on the same thing. Our work is impacting each other. Our work could support each other. And they realize that we ought to maybe see about getting together. So a few decide, hey, let's get together, get to know each other, find out what each other's doing, and build relationship. If you remember, the orange in the first part of my talk represents relationships. We've got a few people from this group on the ground getting together. And then they're saying, you know, as we do this, wouldn't it be great if we brought more people on the ground into our relationship building, getting to know each other, becoming closer in working on this common purpose that we all share. And so this group in the middle might begin doing some things like convening or closing triangles or making introductions to try to bring more and more people in relationship together. And then there might get to be a point where they go, wow, wouldn't it be great if we could visualize what our connections look like? And so they may start to think, how could we create a map? And how might creating this map help provide us more agency and help us do more self-organizing, all towards this common purpose that we share? So the core begins to make a map. And what these arrows going up here represent is that the map is getting its data directly from the members themselves, and then it's being visualized, and the visualization and all of the data is available back to the members of this social change effort, whatever it may be. And this is our first iteration of a social system map. So the data is flowing from the members through an application called sumApp. This is the data collection tool that Christine and her partner, Tim, developed. It's getting visualized in a tool called Kumu, and the data visualization in the data is made available to the members of the network. So the core is using this data. They're beginning to think strategically about how we use it, because we've now got this data flowing from the members and back to the members, and it's available to everybody. There's new opportunities that are coming up about how we can maybe strengthen relationships. So maybe the core is coming up with some really interesting questions to bring back to the membership. Maybe again, they're finding topics around which to convene. And all the while, the map is iterating, and the data, this curve inward, the data is becoming closer to the core purpose of the members. It's becoming more aligned with this group of change people here on the ground. And over time, it continues to iterate. We perhaps add new questions that we're going to ask. We have new views and ways of looking at the data. We've got maybe more people entering their information. The relational shifts continue to happen, but you'll also see in this graphic, we've got the purple. And so we're starting to make those cognitive shifts. It is supporting the cognitive shifts happening within the core, as they also support these cognitive shifts of embracing complexity thinking with the whole of the network. And it iterates more. We have more and more cognitive shifts happening that are being supported by the social system mapping, until finally it all converges as you see these lines cross. And here we actually have this deeper integration and alignment of the data and the map and the social change effort, this network in this community. And so the system starts to see itself, it has self-awareness, it's really a learning organization, thus at this point maximizing its transformational impact. So that's the theory of change behind a social system map. And if you come back to SenseMaking, you'll get to see this over and over again. So everybody gets it kind of integrated into our whole understanding of how this works. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to Curtis.
All right. And I'm going to start sharing.
Curtis, your voice is a little low. Is there?
Let me make sure I'm on the right mic here. Hang on a second.
I mean, I heard you, but
Now can you hear me?
yeah, it's moderately better.
How's that?
No different.
Well, just to make sure that we don't have this problem, I'm gonna put my AirPod in. Okay, how's that sound?
Hmm?
Does that sound better?
What do you guys think? It's different. It's definitely different. Is it clearer, easier to hear for people? Say something more.
Hello, check, check. Did I sound okay during our break?
It sounds okay now to me.
It's okay. So
All right.
for a
well,
person
if
with
I-
slight hearing loss, it could be better, but I'll just turn up my speaker and then I'll have to like turn it down really quick when somebody else talks who's got a much louder connection.
if I start muttering, tell me.
Okay, I can
and
do that.
I'll speak up more.
Thank you.
I'm also going to switch camera, I guess, because
And you do know you're sharing your screen. I'm just in
yeah.
case. Okay.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right.
And Curtis, we're seeing the weather in Vancouver.
Yeah.
It's 47 degrees.
How are you seeing that?
You,
That's what you're
showing.
I think you shared the wrong screen. A different
Goodness.
monitor.
Talk
All right.
about a transition here.
Careful,
See?
Curtis.
That's why I was saying we're sharing your screen. I should have said what was on it.
There. Does that
There.
look
Okay, now we're on the right monitor.
that look
I
more
see the
appropriate?
CDE model sitting there.
Okay, good.
Okay.
I am a professional. Well, okay. So good morning, everybody. I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about this tool that was developed years ago in the HSD, the Human Systems Dynamic Institute, by Glenda Ouyang. And it's called Designing Exchanges for Fit. And I want to back up before we talk too much about that, because central to the use of this tool is an understanding of what exchanges are. And if you have been here before, You may recall we've talked about another tool that exists within the HSD ecosystem that's called the CDE tool, which stands for Containers, Differences, and Exchanges. And exchanges is the part that I want to just remind us of collectively, because that's what we're going to be focusing on. But I'll reference containers. Containers are any similarities that contain the system while patterns emerge. And I'm going to be using as an example for today a container that I'm working with called in the city of Vancouver. So I have a client right now that we're doing some social systems change work and some mapping with. It's the Public Works Department for the city of Vancouver, and that's the container. So, and then within that container is differences. There's lots of different identities within that container, and the differences of those entities are where the tension is that causes the possibility for influence and decision making and action. And the exchange between those differences is what we're going to be focusing on. And in the description of designing exchanges for fit, they use this definition: the way a system shares information, energy, and other resources between agents. So the agents would be the folks in the Public Works Department of the City of Vancouver. So this little slide is just a couple illustrations of CDE. This upper left one is the one that was designed by HSD. But just to expand our thinking a little bit about what a container, differences, and exchanges might look like, here's a carbon atom to the right. So the container is the atom. The differences are protons, neutrons, and electrons. And the exchanges are the energy between those things that do two really important things. One, the exchange draws the elements of the atom together, and it keeps them from becoming one thing. So they stay individual, but they stay connected at the same time. So there's an attractive and a repulsive force that's always part of the difference in exchange. And then the bottom right, if you go up a level, just thinking in terms of the container, difference, and exchange, a molecule, same kind of thing, whole bunch of different atoms. They don't ever merge into the same thing, but when they're connected together and organized in a way where their exchanges, the differences between them, cause an exchange, then you end up with a molecule that is useful in some way. Anybody recognize what molecule that is? You're probably all drinking it this morning.
H2O.
It's caffeine.
Oh, caffeine.
Yes. And then this other one, just to go up larger scale, this is a stand of aspens. I'm in the middle of reading the overstory right now, which is about trees, and so I'm fascinated all over again. But a stand of aspen is the same kind of thing. There's a ton of differences within the container of, say, an aspen forest, and they're all exchanging to maintain balance and growth in the forest. Does that all make sense? Not too okay. Then this is the container of City of Vancouver's Public Works Department. This is their organizational chart. There's about 400 members within this container or this system. And there's a lot of differences. There are generational differences. There are social differences. There are political differences, role differences, all kinds of different things. And what we're trying to do is figure out how to design the way that all of those different entities work so that we find a sort of a better way of existing together, a more healthy experience for everybody, and cause that to emerge. So let's talk a little bit about what we mean when we say designing exchanges for fit. Now, what you're seeing on your screen right now is an adaptation. It's the exact same information, but it's an adaptation of a graphic that HSD put together, and it contains 4 different dimensions that you would utilize if you're designing exchanges. And each one of these dimensions is you can think of in terms of a spectrum. So there's a length dimension, a way to adapt exchanges according to their length, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. There's width, there's direction, and then there's dynamic, which I keep stumbling on. I want to say dynamism, but if we're talking about the length dimension, there's 2 different ends of the spectrum. And I'll use the example that I was talking about with public works. In public works, after I've worked with management to identify patterns that are going on within the organization, exchanges that are already there between the differences, we've developed an exchange design that shortens the length of exchanges. So if you see under the short thought bubble, we're moving towards making exchanges shorter. So we're going to face-to-face, immediate turnaround. We're having one-on-one conversations rather than what's been happening in the past is longer exchanges, lots of emails being sent out, even things like billboards being a way of communicating with people in public works. And so there's been, because in the length dimension they've been too long, there's a disconnect between, in this case, between management and the folks that work in the field. And so we're trying to shorten that dimension so that the connection is stronger. Does that make sense? Okay. The next dimension that you can look at is width, and the spectrum is from narrow to wide. And what I've been doing so far has been using wide exchanges with directors and management. So we've been having sort of theoretical conversations and looking at the big picture. And literally, I've given them white papers, what would be considered white papers. We've talked about policy and very high level conceptual things so that they could get an understanding of what it is that we're going to try to do within their organization. What they're shooting for is an increase in mental health. The Public Works Department has a lot of guys in the construction industry, and that industry has some of the highest rates of different kinds of mental illness of any industry, and they're concerned about that. So that's what we're working on together. So what they've thought in the past was that they would use narrow tools, narrow ways of exchanging by like having flyers and different things available for guys to use as resources, but those haven't been being utilized. And so we're pulling back and coming up with a whole different strategy. And that's why I've been using wide exchanges with management, which will transition to short exchanges that are invitations, but they're going to be the short exchanges are going to be face to face, back to the length dimension, so that the guys who have a readiness in the organization are going to be invited early. So wide with managers, and then instead of narrow in the way that it's been used in the past. That felt gobbledygookish to me. Any questions on that? Okay. All right. Third dimension is direction. This is a nice and simple one. The spectrum is sort of an either or, one way flow from speaker to listener, or two-way info flow between the speaker and the listener. And this has been the case. It's been primarily one way from upper level directors and managers to people working in the field. And we're developing strategies to move this dimension into a two-way direction where the voices, particularly of people who have a high level of readiness and are willing to engage in conversations about mental health, which in the construction industry is labeled as touchy-feely. So guys who are interested and willing to get a little touchy-feely, we're engaging in two-way conversations with them so that we can design strategies that are going to be more likely to be adopted, new beliefs and behaviors that are going to be more likely to be adopted by as many people in the industry as possible in public works. Last but not least is the dynamic dimension. And the two ends of the spectrum are either amplify or damp. So this would be looking at different behaviors or ways of engaging exchanges that are that meet the purpose. And if they do meet the purpose and you want to build or expand them, then you would amplify. So you would call attention to them, you would celebrate them, you would encourage, give rewards, things like that. And then on the other end of the spectrum, to reduce or minimize behaviors, ways of exchanging that are not seen as healthy, we would dampen. They are often dampened in these ways. I want to point out that we're not encouraging the ignoring, punishing, criticizing, or detracting from behaviors. That doesn't seem like a connecting, reverencing, or healing way of interacting. However, there are ways to dampen that aren't dominating, and that's what we're going to be working on within the Public Works Department. Some of the things that we're focusing on is what did I say? We're actually dampening by amplifying exchanges of honesty and vulnerability about emotions and needs and things like that, and using the guys that are having good experiences to focus the attention on those stories and sort of detract from the stories, from the ways of engaging that we see happening a lot of times in the construction industry, where if you get too touchy-feely, you get mocked and derided and ignored. So we're moving towards amplifying positive behaviors, positive exchanges. That's the story of designing exchanges.
Curtis, can I throw in a thing that just came to me about
Yes, please.
dampening? I was just reflecting on how Curtis and I have both been doing this year-long course with a woman, Mickey Cashton, who teaches nonviolent communication and applies it to systems and systems change. And I was thinking, oh, Mickey dampens exchanges by being super specific about what she wants to hear, as opposed to what she's not ready, like what will move us to purpose, and by focusing on like saying, like just being really explicit about what is desirable. So for instance, when she's saying she wants to hear from people who don't usually talk, she's dampening the exchange dynamic of people who are comfortable and who are mainstream and used to talking in public, not talk. She's dampening them from talking to make space for people who don't usually talk, but she's very explicit and clear about it, rather than shaming the person who's talking all the time, or rather than punishing them or anything like that. She just is explicit. So I just wanted to say, I think that just that holding explicit intention about what exchanges we're looking for is also a way of it's both a way of dampening and amplifying sort of at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, I like this one because it feels like you can use Amplify as a dampening tool
Yeah,
without specifically like ignoring or you can do it in a way that doesn't ignore um like by not paying attention to it,
yeah,
but by focusing it on purpose.
right. And I'll
Yeah.
just point out that there are norms, patterns that exist in a mainstream context that where we're unconsciously dampening certain voices and amplifying other voices just by being in our normal, in what feels comfortable, letting everybody stay in their comfort zone, or by not noticing the patterns. And so dampening and amplifying is always happening. And the idea is to be clear, to be intentional and explore what do we want to dampen and amplify, and then be more explicit about it. Because it's not a neutral thing. I mean, in any right, like right now, my voice is amplified, and there's a reason for that, and hopefully it's on purpose, but it's always happening. Like every exchange, there's something being dampened and something being amplified. So being really clear about that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to stop amplifying my voice now and turn my mute back on.
Thank you, Christine. And is there any other comments, questions, curiosities, observations before we go into breakout rooms?
I have a
Amy.
simple one, Curtis. What is FIT? Is FIT an acronym for something? FIT?
No.
No. Okay.
No, it's just fit for function is what's being referenced there. Yeah. So you could also say designing exchanges so that they fit our purpose, what we're trying to accomplish. Yeah. And it's one of the things I've noticed in applying this tool to this public works project is that I'm using all of them sort of simultaneously to get to what Christine was saying. There's one of the things we're trying to overcome is norms within the construction industry as it's represented in the public works department. And most of those norms are unconscious. And so I have had to go wide with people who have the capacity to influence from a one-way perspective so that they understand, they can see the norms and take hold of a new paradigm that they're going to try to influence. And so it's one way in short of in terms of length interactions until the width in those short interactions gets absorbed. So the new paradigm gets absorbed by areas where there's people that have a high readiness, and then they start adopting beliefs and behavior that we amplify as a way to dampen norms in other areas and hopefully spread through the network. And this is a fabulous example of how a social systems map could be utilized, because we can start showing where the areas of readiness are and the most likely places that we can spread new norms based on a paradigm that says like healthy, vulnerable, honest interaction between differences as a kind of exchange is beneficial to creating the emergence of health in the system. We can manage that much more specifically and accurately if we can map that stuff and watch how it develops, as long as there's people that are participating in the map, which is a whole nother fascinating thing to figure out. Okay, I thought what we would do today is spend some time in a breakout session, and my thinking is that each person would have 5 minutes plus or minus, and each one of you would pick an exchange within your system that you would like to design. So one of those one of those, a kind of exchange. So in my example, the exchange that's happening is, let's just call it the touchy-feely exchange. That's not happening very well in this system. And then pick one of the dimensions, either width, length, direction, or dynamic, and talk through how you would apply that dimension, how you would adjust that dimension to change the way the exchange is happening in the direction of purpose so that it fits better with what you're trying to accomplish. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's take, we have a Jim's leaving. That was a wave goodbye. So that means we have 3 people, right? Perfect. So that's the breakout. Pick an exchange and a dimension, and then talk through together how you would apply that dimension to adjust, to adapt the exchange.
Welcome back, everyone. So Curtis, I don't know if you have are we handing it back to you? Are you going to facilitate the reflection?
That's what I was thinking. If they're just give an opportunity for Mary and Willard and Bobby to kind of share what their thinking was, any ahas or directions that they wanted to go in.
If they want to.
If you're, yeah, if you would like.
Yeah, I feel like the only reflection I'm having is that, like, moving forward, if the firm that I work for, like, if we do more mapping in the future, that maybe looking at like these boxes that you showed, like looking at these kind of design, almost like instructions, is a good place to start, like when you're deciding what you want to create, as opposed to kind of assessing it on the back end, which is what I'm doing now. Like, okay, where does what's going on fit into these places, or which one of these things is relevant to the way that we're engaging with the map? But I'm thinking, like, in the future, we could start with this and it be a part of like how you decide with the client what the map it like actually should look like. And also the idea that system mapping is more about process than it is about product is also something that I think should be like made more clear to clients on the front end. And like make it clear how much engagement is going to be needed for the map to continue to live, as opposed to, like, I don't know, when you just give a client some slide deck for deliverables and it's like, okay, and we're done. So lots to think about on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad that landed for you. That's really important stuff. Yeah. I'll shut up, Kurt.
No, I was very excited to hear that as well.
Yeah, I talked about the work that I'm doing in bringing together lay leaders from congregations, across the country. I focus more on the length aspect, which is because it's, a national convening, then in order to do it, well, we are doing it using online, like Zoom meetings. And we are faced with the time pressure that I think all of us, are faced with, in terms of people dealing with burnout, that kind of thing. And even the generational thing where we're looking to bring in new young leaders and volunteers, and their expectations are different than, the baby boomers and that kind of stuff. And so we will meet as a group quarterly. And I plan to develop some almost like small group ministry, but some or communities of practice that would meet around specific issues, either roles or interests between the quarterly meetings. And then we would have an in-person meeting at our excuse me, at our annual meeting each year. When we have our national annual meeting, we make some provision for folk to meet face to face. So that kind of and while thinking about that, I also have to think about the loan or the newsletter or some way to kind of keep people informed about what's happening. So the length dynamic was something that I kind of really related to, since so many aspects of it are alive and well in the work that I'm doing.
Mm.
And of
Willard, you
course,
mentioned.
I was
Sorry,
going to
go
say
ahead.
that I was going to say that of course there are aspects of the other, components of this frame that are
Mhm.
happening as well. But I think I lift up a length.
You mentioned Zoom meetings. I wonder if you were thinking of Zoom meetings as long or short in the length dimension.
I was thinking of Zoom meetings as short, it's particularly based on this particular rubric where we talk about short being face to face or immediate, as opposed to long being a newsletter or some maybe written kind of communication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think I would agree with that. It's interesting because you can be physically distant, which would be long, but then turn that into short with Zoom or some sort of, which is just a really, I get tired of Zoom meetings sometimes, but I'm also amazed constantly that I get to have conversations, immediate face-to-face conversations with people all over the planet.
That's why we decided we would only do them quarterly rather than more frequent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mary, did you have anything that you wanted to share? You're muted.
Just the reflection, thinking back of leaders, we're working in the area of complexity, and often leaders are working on a local, regional, and national level all at the same time, and how this graphic is useful in working more effectively in that whole mashup of work, and how overwhelming it can be for leaders. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I did put a link in the chat if you would like to download this graphic for reference.
Right.
So feel free to click on that. And I think with that, we're ready to wrap up and hear announcements from Kara. Is there anything else, Amy and Christine, that needs to be addressed before we?
Give me a moment I had a thought. Oh. This is a thing that could go either in our reflection later, yours and mine and Amy's, but since we have a few minutes, I thought I was, so can I just say, this is a thought that as we're talking, we have a norm of just waiting for people to speak up. So, and sometimes that means that the same people always speak up and other people never have an opportunity to speak up. And so I was thinking, like, as you were, I was realizing I was starting to wanting to step in and facilitate more the way Mickey does. And I realized, oh, we need to sort of make that a norm for all of us, because we're used to this just waiting. And And so I'll just say for everyone, because, and I'm saying this to all of us, because it's a collective norm that we could work on shifting together. And I want to say why, just because there's a few extra minutes, which is, and in the context I'm referring to, there can be, 100 people in the space. And so it's really important when there's 100 people in the space to not just wait, because the conversation will go everywhere and there won't, it'll turn into a sort of a free for all. But the idea is that if you have something you want to say, you raise your hand, and then so that we can see who all has something they want to say. And then the facilitator, i.e. Curtis in this context, and there's very few of us here, so it doesn't matter in this context. There was no harm done, and there's no real need for it because there's so few of us, and many of us know each other. But I wanted to just spell out the process so that it's clear when it is a bigger group or when it is more important. The idea would be that we just ask people to raise their hand, not to just voice in, which is counterintuitive to what most people have become comfortable with. And then the facilitator transparently decides who speaks next, not in order of who raised their hand first, but in order of who usually doesn't speak or who we haven't heard from in a long time, so that they're starting to specifically include the voices that don't usually get heard and make space for the people who aren't maybe as comfortable speaking into a space and who aren't as comfortable just jumping in and saying everything they're thinking. Because I'm this kind of person, you can tell. I will just jump in and opine about everything all day, and then no one else will get any space to talk. I don't do that in every context, but there are contexts where I would do that. And so having to raise my hand and have somebody say, I'm going to pick Bobby because we haven't heard from Bobby very often and we want to meet her needs, then tells us, oh, this is a different norm where just your dominating behavior is not what we default to. And so then people who are less comfortable speaking, knowing that they're going to be given space and time, may be more likely to raise their hand. But that requires intentional facilitation. And so that's what I was noticing that you were doing the waiting thing. And because I'm trying to practice this more intentional facilitation style, I was wanting to jump in and start doing it. And I didn't. But so I thought, oh, I have to tell Curtis that. And then I thought, well, if there's enough time, maybe I could just say it to everybody, because then we'd all get it. Or at least have an introduction to this as another way of facilitating a conversation that really is aimed at making sure that we're getting different perspectives and dissenting views and the usually marginalized voices included. So thanks for letting me share that.
Yes. So anybody have a guess as to what dimension of exchange that would be designing with? I have a guess.
I do too, but we'll see if anybody else does first. Willard raised his hand.
Willard.
Dynamic.
That would have been my guess as well. Yeah. In a way that is not dominating. It's very invitational, and yeah, it's one of the things I really like about that. When Mickey does that, she will very intentionally amplify the voice of whoever it is that has their hand raised, that she thinks she puts in first whoever is least likely to have had their voice heard so far. So she's amplifying and dampening simultaneously.
And in doing that, she's actually, she always says it very clearly. I'm not going to call on you so-and-so because we heard from you. We've already heard from you twice today, or because, I spent a lot of time with you last time, etc. And so she's also training all of us to notice our frequency of contribution and notice the frequency of others' contribution and have a more like comfort with not being called on. So they're like, one of her things is men generally in patriarchal male training are more comfortable speaking than women, or will speak first before women. And so Mickey will often say, if it's a new man and we've not heard from her, then we'll hear from him. But if there's that gender dynamic, or if it's a race dynamic, she'll be explicit. I'm not going to call on, I would like to call on so-and-so because, and it's great because the men are always like, okay, yeah, don't call on me, like they've learned and they're comfortable with that, and they appreciate that this is a way they can contribute to the group, which is by not by making, like, by leaving space for other people. And so it's a whole mind shift just in the transparent facilitation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also two-way. She
Yeah.
always asks the person that she's going to
Yeah.
skip over.
Yeah.
What if the thing that they have to share is urgent or something like that, and then talks about the fact that they've heard from him, we haven't heard from so and so, is that okay with you? And
yeah.
so it's very
yeah
love it.
Okay, so to be on time and within our to respect everybody's time and let them leave at the bottom of the hour, let's have Kara do announcements, and then we'll do our goodbye ritual. I stepped in and took over the facilitation. Go ahead, Kara.
That's okay.
That's okay with you.
We are wrapping up our community of practice sessions for the year. So our next on-ramp and deep dive are both in the month of November, excuse me, and we take December off. And so our next upcoming on-ramp is next week on the 11th, and our deep dive session is on the 18th. Community member Evan Kiris will be joining us to kind of get into a deeper dive of the map that he shared with us from last month. And those are in our session recordings if you would like to reflect back and watch those. And then our next SenseMaking session won't be until January. So we will see you all in the new year for that. And I'll put links in the chat.
25.
Thank you. And so, Bobby, I think this may be the first time you've done this, but I will count 3, 2, 1. We'll all unmute, and then we'll all just give each other our blessings for the day, our well wishes, our appreciation, and then we'll close. So just jump off as soon as you feel complete with that voicing. So here's our goodbye ritual. 3, 2, 1.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
It's
you,
great to see
everybody.
Wonderful
you.
seeing new
Bye.
faces
See
again.
you soon.
Bye. See you soon.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.